Hello, everyone. This is Kristie with AG Takes Over. I'm glad you're here. This is a little bit of a different video than I usually make, but let's go on a field trip. I went with my dolls, and I figured you can come along after the fact. So my wife and I recently went to the Titanic exhibit at the um, Center of Science and Industry in Columbus, Ohio. Everybody calls it COSI. It's a giant museum. And there is a Titanic exhibit there that arrived on March 9th and stays all the way through the beginning of September, September 2nd. We talked about when to go, and my wife said I would really like to go when it's not summer break for all the kids, because then it's going to be even more crowded potentially because families will come. So the cost for the exhibit is only $15, but you had to have general admission also, which was super annoying because the only reason we wanted to go was for that exhibit. So we had to pay $30 just to get in the front door and then an additional $15 to go see the exhibit. That was $45 each, which I thought was nuts. But if you have a pass, then it's only an additional $15. Yeah, we left the 4-year-old at home. Well, it was a daycare day for her. So we left her at daycare, and I'm really glad that we did. We saved a lot of money that way, and she would have been bored out of her gourd at the Titanic event. We're reading the Magic Treehouse Titanic book, but that's kind of where she's at with her understanding of this tragedy. So yeah, we went early on a weekday morning to avoid the big crowds and better our chances of getting good pictures. Why did it matter so much that we got good pictures? Well, look at the dresses my wife had custom made. She didn't do it. She paid somebody. The shop is called the Doll Seamstress Shop, and the seller is not on Etsy, but you can find her on Facebook. Each of these dresses, are gorgeous, first of all. And I know a lot of you who watch my channel who do like more historical things probably feel like I don't put them in historical stuff often enough. So here you go, some 1912 looks. They were $45 each, then plus the shipping, and they were ordered at the same time, so that saved on shipping. Also, Grace found this jewelry set on Amazon and tasked me with turning the pair of earrings into 2 necklaces. And then we picked 2 girls to take along. Shoes were easy enough. We just picked out some historical boots, and then it was down to the hair. So again, Grace tasked me with finding some inspiration photos and styling their hairdos. Here's what I came up with. I'm pleased. I wanted to give them both very distinct looks so that they didn't look like they were twinning. And I didn't want to really alter the curl that they both kind of came with wavy hair. And I didn't want to alter that and like set pin curls or anything. So working with their natural hair curliness, I think that these work really well. And we took them in doll carriers, the rectangular kind, just so that they didn't get jostled around too much. The rules were no flash photography, and the lighting was pretty dim, so we didn't get a ton of pictures inside the exhibit. We did get a few that turned out really well, and I'm going to share those as I talk about the whole excursion, but I did want to share some of the cool things about the exhibit itself. So one of the cool things, grim but cool, was that we were given boarding passes. So they just had this stack of boarding passes, and everybody got one. And as you can see, the back of each one was distinct. So it says the passenger ticket, where they're sailing from, the date that they're sailing, the name of the person, their age, where they're from, who's traveling with them, which class cabin they were in, a cabin number if they knew, where they were going, and kind of the reason. And then a little bit about a fact about the passengers. So this one was Grace's, and then I got somebody named Frank John Goldsmith. And you see the QR code on them. At some point in the exhibit, you get to this scanner and you find out whether your character survived or perished. So I scanned mine. Here we go. Frank John Goldsmith was British. Hoping that Frank had survived, his wife Emily scoured Carpathia to no avail. Frank was gone. His last words to his son were, "See you later." If his body was ever recovered, it wasn't identified. talk about bringing history to life, right? Um, and then we kind of surmised that since Grace's passenger was a third class passenger, that she would have been less likely to have survived, which, I mean, statistically, she was less likely, but hers did survive. She did not wake when the ship hit the iceberg, but then when the stewards came around and were getting everybody up, then that's when she woke up. She forgot her new hat and she raced back to get it. Oh my gosh, lady. Seriously? But she still made it into the lifeboat. She later married, had a family, settled in Jersey City. She ran a boarding house and lived until 1959. I thought that was really interesting. Another cool thing was, I mean, this is like sad, but interesting, and I didn't know it, was that there is apparently metal eating bacteria that is slowly consuming what's left of, all of the ship that is still underwater. So these excursions happen every few years by experts who are going down to do recoveries because in a few years, this says perhaps a decade or two, there will be virtually nothing left. Here were just a couple. There were lots of artifacts, but I did not take pictures of all of them. And I didn't share all the ones I did take pictures of. But here are some dishes. And then it's interesting because they put above it the picture of that was taken when they actually got this stuff. And they don't pick any of this stuff up by hand. It's all when they're down in the sub goes down with lights all off to conserve energy. And then the lights come on once they hit the bottom, and they don't get out at all. It's just robotic hands, using cameras and everything. Robotic hands pick stuff up. And if it's a smaller, more fragile artifact, then they use suction. So it kind of vacuums it up. Here was a pot, and you can see on one side the larger stock pot in the back has had that metal eating bacteria, kind of dissolving it. And then this was a first for me because I've gone to a Titanic exhibit in the past, but I had not experienced this. You could actually touch it. There was a case that had 2 holes drilled into it. I'll show you in just a second. And they put a piece of the ship underneath the case, and you could reach in and touch it. And it says the visible holes once held the rivets that attached this thing to the ship. But here is the piece that we got to touch, and you can see the 2 holes on the case that it's in, and you can see the discoloration from where people have rubbed and touched those spots over and over. All right, and then the iceberg itself was not duplicated. I know in the past there have been, like when I went to a Titanic exhibit in the past, there was like a giant thing of ice. And so people would get in a line and walk past and touch it. And they would say, the water was colder than this because salt water has a different freezing point. And so imagine your whole body being in water this temperature, and talked about like how many of them did not, wouldn't have even noticed their lungs were filling up with water because of the hypothermia and whatnot. Anyway, this one does not have that. The exhibit just has this kind of, maybe it's plastic and it's almost like it's got glitter or something on it. So I just took a picture of the doll. Maybe she is running towards a lifeboat or something. And you also get a sense of how dark it was in there without flash photography. This is not a beautiful photo, but it just kind of shows you what we were working with in terms of photos. We did get some nice pictures, though. Here they are in a hallway. Obviously, anything that's not under a case is a recreation. But yeah, this hallway was a good place for pictures. And then obviously the grand staircase, which was like the representation of what life was like for first class passengers on board. The level of luxury. So this recreated grand staircase was really nice. And obviously when the exhibit is busier, this part is going to be crowded. There's a photo op, there's an employee there. You can take your own pictures, but they can also take them for you and charge you an arm and a leg. We were really hoping to have enough time to set up pictures, and mission accomplished. Lighting was still a challenge, but we got as good a pictures as we could have, given we were using our phones and no flash photography allowed or no extra lighting allowed. It was just the 3 of us, literally just Grace and I and the employee. So that was really nice. And then we moved on, and the representation of second class accommodations is here. You can see their cabins had a dining area inside them and a vanity, and still had, nice wood paneling, lots of fancy wood. Like, this is definitely nicer than second class tickets on many ships at that time. And then you can also see in that same space is the sleeping quarters. So this would be a cabin for second class passengers. And then a little further on, you get to see what third class was like. This is a stark difference, but at the same time, like, not horrible. And I was going to try to just summarize these placards, but in the interest of accessibility to different viewers, I'm going to go ahead and read them. So you can skip forward or, fast forward this section if you don't want to hear it all. Anyway, it says, third-class passengers traveling on the Titanic were mostly European immigrants looking for a better life in America. Some had already established themselves in the United States and were returning after visits home. Others were joining family members who had traveled ahead of them and sent money for their journey. Some passengers may have been able to afford a second-class ticket but wanted to save money for their arrival in America. A third-class ticket on the Titanic to New York cost $40, about $900 today, which was a far cry from the $4,500 price of a first-class luxury suite. Geez, around $103,000 today. These were the obnoxiously rich people. That's not on the placard, by the way. A third-class cabin would likely be occupied by up to 4 strangers who spoke different languages. I don't know why they wouldn't seat them according to language. Cabins were cramped and very plain in design. The ceilings were covered with a tangle of pipes and support beams, and the noise and vibration of the engines could always be heard and felt. Despite these conditions, many third-class passengers found their accommodations to be more than adequate. Unlike other liners, which used straw, Titanic's bunks had real mattresses. The ship also featured open-air deck space on the poop deck, which many rival liners lacked. The bathrooms were also an improvement for many who had never used indoor plumbing before. Titanic's 2 bathrooms for its 700 third-class passengers would not suffice today, you think, but were manageable in the time of the once-a-week bath. That's funny. I feel like that was a stretch even in the time of the once-a-week bath, but nobody asked me. Okay, I'm not going to read this one verbatim, but I believe, if I'm mathing correctly, that there were approximately 2,228 people on board, including crew and passengers. If they had stuck to their original design of having 32 lifeboats and filling them to capacity, they should have been able to save 1,900 of those. But because they wanted to save money and they didn't want the ship to look too cluttered, they reduced that design to only 20 lifeboats. So instead of being able to save 1,900, the max they could have saved would be 1,178. In reality, they only saved 705 because so many boats were not filled to capacity. Unsurprising to anyone, even if you weren't familiar with this story, the bulk of those losses were third-class passengers and crew. All right, here's another one that I'm not going to read in its entirety, but I think anybody who has watched the movie or knows pretty much anything about the Titanic knows that the band kept playing till the very end, right? What I didn't really understand was that this was really due to their classification because they were contractors, which is fascinating. As somebody who works in a field that has a lot of independent contractors and like labor laws matter to my profession a lot, this was fascinating. So because they were contractors, they weren't viewed as crew, so they weren't expected to help people get into the lifeboats, but they also weren't considered passengers, so they weren't allowed to get in the lifeboats to escape. So it was just, I don't know, weird, labor designation is the reason that they just played until everything went down. And then many of you will know, and sorry for the blurry picture, about the unsinkable Molly Brown, Margaret Brown. I learned that she was like 44 or 45 when she was on this boat, but she's famous for, it says, wresting control away from the unstable quartermaster Robert Hitchens, and encouraging women in her boat to row with her. And then she did try to get them to go back and like try to convince all these women that were rowing with her, like, hey, let's go back and try to save others. And they're like, no, we're good. There was a movie that came out in 1964 about her. I've never seen it. Apparently, like, she is a big figure, but I'm sharing this just in case you don't know. And also because when Grace and I were talking about it, she said, oh, yeah, I went to her house in Colorado. And I was like, oh, well, that's fascinating. That's a little tidbit I'll include. And then just a couple more things from plaques that I want to share with you. And then I will give you some more pictures at the end of dolls. So you can just pause and read this one if you want, but it's just about kind of what was the aftermath, you know, when catastrophes happen and they do investigations and they come to their conclusions. How does that translate into consumer safety laws and regulations? And so I thought that was interesting. And then here, the last one is just creepy. I did not know this. So some dude in was born in Argentina and then was in England studying. And then his brother, who was in the United States, was like, hey, bro, come to my wedding. And he was like, all right, fine. And he was supposed to be on one ship, and then there was a coal strike, and he had to get on the Titanic, and he had to leave earlier, and he was very unhappy and snarky about it. And he wrote this letter to his friend. And it said, it really seems unbelievable that I have to leave a few days before your arrival. Okay, so maybe it's not snarky. He planned on spending time with a friend who was coming to England, and he's like, this sucks because I have to leave early. I wanted to see you. He says, really seems unbelievable that I have to leave a few days before your arrival, but there's no help for it. I've got to go. You figure, Josie, I'm boarding the greatest steamship in the world, but I don't really feel proud of it at all. Right now, I wish the Titanic were lying at the bottom of the ocean. And yes, he died in the sinking. So Grace said, be really careful what you wish for. All right. And on that pleasant note, after that, after a couple minutes more, then we exited, and I wanted to get some nice lighting pictures while the girls were dressed so beautifully. So here is Sage. Got some close-ups of her hair, pictures of this stunning dress. You can see the, what is it? Heart of the Ocean necklace on her. And then Sabine, same deal. Get to see a few pictures of her and of her hair. And you can check out the necklace. And that is it, friends. Share whatever you want, Titanic related or doll related, in the comments. I'm game for whatever. Take care. If you enjoy my content and you're not subscribed, please consider doing so. If you want to do something extra supportive, you're welcome to share the video, give it a thumbs up, or write something in the comments. Talk to you soon.